Hello everyone, and happy 2023. Happy New Year to all of our listeners. If you don't know where you are listening to Nintendo Everything Refresh, the official podcast of NintendoEverything.com. And we are ringing in 2023 with a ton of news, lots of exciting stuff. We're going to talk some Fire Emblem in this episode, because that game is right around the corner. Lots of indies in this episode, so thank you so much for tuning in. It's not just me here today. We have also got Dennis Gagliardato.
Hello, hello.
And we've got Nicolas Shade.
Hello, everyone.
Hope everyone enjoyed their holiday break. Got some good gaming time in, hopefully. I don't know about you guys, but I took some time off work, and I'm a little ashamed to admit that most of it was spent in front of the couch playing games. Not all of it, but probably more than a productive adult should be. But,
look, no harm, no foul, no shame.
Counting, right?
No shame. As long as you're enjoying your time, man, it's your life. Do what makes you happy, you know?
Exactly. It's the holidays. It's a time to relax, do some hobbies.
Get some more sleep in.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
Definitely.
get some more sleep in. Yes. Did you guys make any New Year's resolutions this year? It seems like that's what everyone's talking about right now.
Yeah, that tends to be the thing every year, huh? I mean, I know, like, I did it for a while, just because it was trendy, but that was, like, way back in, like, high school and stuff. Now, after a point, I finally got to a point in my life where I understood myself enough where I was like, you're not going to follow through.
Okay.
So New Year's resolution.
I thought you were going to say something along the lines of, I thought you were going to say, like, I get to the point where, like, I know myself, like, I'm good, I don't need to resolve anything. Oh, no. You're just like, no, I just give up.
No. I mean, we should always strive to, be better, whether it's in, a hobby or a craft or whatever. But it's... But as for a New Year's resolution, do I have goals? Absolutely, but I always have, goals. It doesn't necessarily pertain to the new year, though. So I don't want to, make something up just because it's like, oh, it's a, new year, new me. No, I'm still the same. I've been the same for the last 10 years, now. So.
Well, that's good, Dennis. We love you the way you are. So don't ever change.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Yeah. No, I'm kind of the same way. I always think about making New Year's resolutions, but when it really comes down to it, I'm mostly like, no, these are just like a bunch of general things I should be doing anyways. I'm just going to try and be better at lots of things in general,
Yeah.
Like, why pick just one thing? But it's a good reminder. Nicholas, you got any New Year's resolutions?
No, but I gotta say I'm probably the same as you guys. Dennis in particular, like, I don't know that I would follow them because it's just not the kind of person I am.
Yeah.
I'll do what needs to be done, but
That's true.
I love how it sounded like you're doing taxes. I'll do what needs to be done.
I do have one New Year's resolution, and that is to play Metroid Prime 4 this year.
Unfortunately, that's out of your hands.
Nintendo needs to get on that because... Well, it's got to happen. I mean, now that I've willed it, it has to happen.
I thought it was to start Xenoblade Chronicles 1.
Well,
cough, cough.
Okay, there's that too. It is on my list. I have it penciled in after, I think, February, March, once I've gotten to play some of the other high priority things on my list. But I will get to it. I'm going to give it a honest try.
You'll get to it after Prime 4 comes out, of course.
I'm going to try and get to it before then, but then, if Prime 4 does come out this year, I mean, everything's going on pause.
So here's
Prime 4 shall drop in February, obviously.
So this just hit me, all right? Now, unfortunately, you would have to wait an extra year for this, Nick, but what if Metro Prime 4 ends up coming out in 2024, right? And they end up showing the release date by removing the 4 from the logo and then being like 2020. I think it'd be a cool little neat marketing thing, but again, you would have to wait an extra year for that, unfortunately.
Yeah, for the sake of that alone, Dennis, I think it might be okay. For that particular marketing stuff. I think we should all wait until 2024. Yep. Well, folks, we have a lot of news to catch up on, so I won't delay us any longer. So I don't know if you guys remember, but in the last episode, before we had our holiday break, I mentioned, I don't think, there's going to be anything crazy happening, but because I said that something inevitably was going to happen, And it did. Basically, the day that we published our episode, it feels like, or that week, Nintendo, they had what was basically an Indie World presentation, but they spread it across 5 days, and they gave it the very smooth name called Inside the House of Indies. And it was like every day, it was like, yeah, this little animation, like different door on the house opens up.
Yeah.
It's kind of like an advent calendar, but they were showing off indie games every day.
Just real late.
I don't know why, but yeah, really late in the year. And so when they first announced this, I was like, I didn't really know what to expect. I was like, there could be some good games that they show off, but also maybe just trying to fill a time slot or something for their marketing. But we got some pretty big news, surprisingly. If you're a fan of indie games, I think the biggest announcement was Sports Story not only got a release date, but it just they just shadow dropped it.
Yeah.
Like 2 days before Christmas.
That was wild.
Yeah.
That was wild, especially like...
That was pretty wild.
Yeah, well, I mean, Golf Story, I'm sure a lot of people felt similarly, but Golf Story, I mean, was one of the... I can't remember, did it come out launch year? I know, I don't want to say it was one of the first games on Switch, but it was definitely within that launch year, I want to say. Golf Story, so it'd been a while.
Yeah.
But that game was like...
Yeah, for sure.
Fantastic, man. Like, that's still to this day, I think, one of my favorite Switch games of the entire library. So, when Sports Story got announced, God knows, years ago, because it has been a while. It looked great, and I was excited for it because I was like, oh, cool, it's more Golf Story, except now we're encompassing everything, which is really cool.
Right.
The humor was great.
All the sports.
Yeah, absolutely. The humor was great. The quest lines were great. That game was just really, really good, and took me back to the days of like sports RPGs on like the Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance, and I loved those. So
totally.
But I funny enough, I still have not picked up Sports Story myself just yet, mainly because I have heard that there are unfortunately a lot of bugs at the moment. So I would like those to get patched out so I have the best experience possible, because I know I'm going to really enjoy that game, but I just don't want that game to be hindered for me, due to a couple of bugs that truly shouldn't take my enjoyment away. But I have a feeling that it, from what I've seen, I don't want that experience. I want to have the best experience possible when I play this, because I know it's going to be great, and I know I'm going to love it, and I just want it to be as smooth, from beginning to end as possible. So
yeah, it's a shame that despite all the hype, there really hasn't been too much. I haven't heard too much positive talk about the game. Like, even setting the bugs aside, which I think have partially been fixed with a patch.
Okay.
I've heard a lot of people just say
they've
the
been
game
patching
just
it.
doesn't really hold up as well as a Golf Story. Just it apparently it spreads itself a little bit too thin, trying to encompass too many different sports, and it just ends up feeling a bit shallow in comparison. Yeah. I haven't played myself, so obviously I can't comment, on a personal level. But it's a shame that, in spite of all the excitement, I just haven't heard too much now that the game has launched.
Yeah, I mean, it did kind of launch in that tight holiday window. I mean, 2 days before Christmas, so not really giving folks a lot of chance to review it. I've honestly just seen reviews dropping in the past few days. Yeah. And yeah, it seems like some folks are a bit mixed on it. I think, the game had a lot to live up to. People were hyping it up for years, and it is a fairly small team, my understanding.
Yeah.
So I think, certainly an ambitious idea trying to combine all these different sports. Yeah, and I'm with you guys. I want to withhold judgment unless I actually play it myself. Yeah. But it's just, I'm glad they finally got it out before the end of the year. That was what they said. So There you go. So yeah, Sports Story is out now. We also got an update in terms of big news on Sea of Stars, which has been shown off in previous Nintendo presentations. We didn't have a super precise release window, and we still don't now, but we at least know it's coming sometime in the summer. And we got a little bit of extra gameplay. So that was nice to see. I mean, Nicholas, I know you love RPGs, seemingly of all varieties, and I'd imagine this one's on your radar.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in it. If I recall correctly, it's a Chrono Trigger-like RPG. That's kind of the style they're going for in terms of combat, at least. I've never actually played Chrono Trigger, so that's a pretty big blind spot in terms of my RPG experience. But I am interested in this. The Messenger, which was the game the developers had worked on previously, was very well received. I've played part of it and I did enjoy it. This so far has looked very pleasant. It has a great art style. It has good music, which, certainly helped by the fact that part of the soundtrack is composed by Yasunori Mitsuda. Yeah, so I'm certainly looking forward to this. I would like to see more about the game, just before it launches, but it's one I'll keep an eye on.
Sure. Yeah, again, we're just so saturated with RPGs at this point. I can't deny looking at it that this game is beautiful and the music does sound really nice. To me, I'm not seeing anything that I haven't seen done before, and I think that's what's keeping me from getting too excited. But, there's some surprises in store. I'm sure there's a lot they just haven't shown off yet.
I think it's also just neat to have RPGs like this. It's not... I feel like you don't usually see indie games that are kind of full-fledged, fantasy RPG adventures. Those tend to be longer games, and it's not something you see super often adapted in like just a smaller form kind of indie style game. So I'm curious just to see from that kind of angle how this is going to perform.
Well, or at the very least, like at a very high level of quality. There are plenty of games that try that, but it certainly seems like a very high quality product. It seems like they're taking their time and putting a lot of love into it. So I'm sure it'll be good. But yeah, that one's coming out in the summer, so I think that's pretty big news. This one I'm super excited for, and I almost picked it up, but I was just in the middle of playing some other games. But one of the games that got shadow dropped during this whole week was a game called Melatonin. And I don't really know how to describe this other than it's kind of like Rhythm Heaven, but it's very dreamy and it's a little kind of surreal, and I think there's a certain element of making social commentary, which I don't really know how deep that goes, but I love Rhythm Heaven, and that was basically all I needed to be sold on this game.
Yeah, I got a couple of press releases about this game earlier in the year, and then it just got kind of quiet. So I was surprised to see it just sort of come out, over the holidays. But it definitely caught my attention right away. Once I read the first press release that I received about it, and since then it's been on my radar. But kind of the same thing as you, Nick, where I was definitely interested in picking it up, but I was already playing a couple other things that I'm heavily invested in at the moment, and I didn't want to just add another thing right now to the backlog, So, Melatonin,
sure.
I'm just gonna have to wait on it for now, but I will continue to take it because I do take a lot of melatonin every night.
There you go. Yeah, not that type of melatonin. In general, I feel like we're getting more of these Rhythm Heaven inspired games. I mean, another one that comes to mind that was announced recently and is coming to Switch, it's called Bits and Bops. And that one looks even more like Rhythm Heaven, I think, than this game does in terms of just the variety and kind of the strangeness of the concepts of its minigames. And then the folks who made Crypt of the Necrodancer, they're making a rhythm game called Rift of the Necrodancer that also seems kind of inspired by Rhythm Heaven. So if Nintendo's not going to make a new Rhythm Heaven, clearly everyone else is, and I am all for that.
A game like that is very influential. So, I mean, again, it's one of those things where, when you don't get it enough or when you haven't seen it for a while, then, other people are just going to take it, into their own hands and just be like, forget it, fine, I'll make my own game about it. That's kind of like it. So.
Right. Yeah. I'm not going to complain because I think just the fans wanting stuff like that, and you can't beat it. Now, this one definitely surprised me to see in an indie presentation. I guess it is technically an indie game, but it certainly doesn't look like one. And frankly, I'm surprised they got it running on the Switch. So it's a game called Mortal Shell, and the complete edition, to be more specific. And it is a Souls-like combat action game. It's an action RPG, and this is definitely something that I did not expect to see, mostly because of the scope of this game and the art style. Also the fact that it's a newer game, it launched on some next-gen consoles, and fairly demanding game to run. So not necessarily my type of game, but it was just a big surprise for me personally.
Yeah, I played a little bit of it on Game Pass. I think it's still on Game Pass, but it was fine. You know, I'm not the demographic for these sorts of games, but I appreciate the art direction though. I think the game does look great, but yeah, no, I'm not a Souls-like person like at all. But I can definitely appreciate what the game tries to do and what it does accomplish. But yeah, it's not,
Right.
it's not for me personally, but it is cool to see it, you know, on the Switch to give, you know, people who prefer that platform, you know, more of an option versus just, you know, Dark Souls remastered, you know. So here's something a lot more big budget and
Sure.
on the level of other, you know, AAA titles that would be on par with that. So, you know, versus something that's, you know, because we see a lot of roguelite or Souls-like, you know, indie games, you know, that take inspiration, but they all more or less have that, you know, retro aesthetic to it, you know, 16-bit art style and stuff like that. You don't typically see,
Uh-huh.
you know, super detailed, you know, 3D worlds like you would Mortal Shell or Dark Souls remastered on Switch, you know. So, you know, it gives
Right.
people who are a fan of that genre something new to look forward to that they can take, you know, on the go.
Yeah, totally. Oh, did I cut out or did Dennis cut out? Oh, shoot. Sorry about that. I disconnected for some reason. I don't know why. That was weird.
Oh, no worries.
No. Yeah, you know, and if you squint at it, it may not be Elden Ring, but if you squint and kind of close your eyes a little bit, it kind of looks like Elden
A
Ring.
little bit, yeah.
So it's closest we'll get to Elden Ring on the Switch is my prediction.
No Melania, but otherwise, you should be good.
Yes, and it's not a cloud version, so hey, that's worth celebrating.
Yeah, well, yeah, that alone is absolutely worth celebrating.
It
Yeah,
does baffle me a little that it doesn't seem to have a frame rate lock. Like it goes up to 60 frames per second, but apparently it doesn't really reach that. So I'm not really sure why, when porting it, they wouldn't have just locked the frame rate to 30.
Yeah.
Huh.
Seems a little odd, but
don't know.
you know, whatever you need to do, I guess, to get the game to run.
I guess, yeah. I'm not a game developer, so I don't know what the thought process is all the time, but yeah. So that's a cool one to see. Now this one also came as a bit of a surprise, just because it's a fairly big name, and I don't think this was previously announced. So Risk of Rain was kind of just one of the seminal roguelikes of the time it came out, and it's getting, I guess, it's called Risk of Rain Returns, and they're describing it as an expanded version of the original game that takes some features from its sequel. Sounds like they're updating the pixel art original a little bit and bringing in some new music, some balance changes. It does look kind of similar to the original game, like aesthetically. Like it doesn't look like a full remake, more like a remaster, I guess, which you don't see a lot for indie games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really don't know much about Risk of Rain, to be quite honest. It's one of those games where I think I've heard the title every now and then, and I think visually I know what it looks like, but I've never really fully understood much more than that, or gone into it further than that. So this did not evoke much for me, but it's interesting to see, like you said, kind of a remaster of an indie game. I wonder what motivated them to do this.
Yeah, well, Gearbox owns Risk of Rain now, which I don't know when exactly that happened, but the original Risk of Rain came out in 2013 and was really popular. Yeah, I think I remember. It was a PlayStation Plus game for the Vita at one point.
Yeah,
I think
that's where I played
own
it.
it. But
yeah, I played it on Vita.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so you've played it before?
Yeah. Well, I mean, as much as I could, and when I say that again, these games, I'm not that demographic, man. So like after like 20 minutes, I was like, nope, that's enough for me. It was tough. It was just kind of like next level too hardcore for me. But I will say I do like the art direction of this remaster like quite a lot. And Risk of Rain 2 was a lot more palatable because it was definitely taken in a different direction. But that first one, man, I couldn't wrap my head around it. Like difficulty aside, I couldn't wrap my head around it.
Yeah. No, I don't blame you. All right, one more game I really want to make sure that we highlight from this House of Indies event. Total left field for me. So this one's developed by Shinen, and they're the makers of a ton of Switch exclusive indies of note. The big ones being that I can think of recently, Fast RMX, and that whole franchise of kind of Wipeout / F-Zero inspired games. They were the makers of Jet Rocket, which you may remember from the WiiWare days. They're generally known for making these really kind of ambitious 3D games that kind of push the hardware. And so this game is a total change of pace for them. It is called the Punchuin, about a penguin who punches things. And it is a 2D side-scroller beat-em-up.
I don't know what you mean about this not being ambitious, honestly. This is like...
No, I didn't say it wasn't ambitious. I just mean it, compared to what they normally do, it's so different,
yes,
you know?
But it's a punching penguin. I mean, what more do you need, really? He's got no hat.
Gloves.
Come on.
I'm noticing.
Yeah, he's adorable.
There's a trend of taking, animals or even vegetables and giving them a gimmick and making a game based off of that. Because didn't we have like Bomb Chicken not that long ago? Something like that. It was just a chicken that laid bombs instead of eggs, and like that game was wild. And then there's a smaller indie game, Dadish, which is just about like this radish that happens to be a father, and you just go around.
I've heard of this.
It's
yeah. It's also Turnip Boy commits tax evasion.
That's another one.
Yes.
Yeah. And Garden Story about like a little blueberry that's like Zelda, basically.
Yeah, no matter whether you are a plant, an animal, or a vegetable, you too can have your own 2D platformer these days. So it's a great time. Yeah. It also looks like there's some Tetris elements to this, because in the gameplay trailer, this one's out now too, by the way, if you're interested in picking it up. You see him kind of like punching blocks to the side, and they like disappear like Tetris style. I don't really know what to make of that, but
yeah, it seems like
I'm
a puzzle
very
platformer
curious.
for the most part.
Okay, so maybe not a beat 'em up. I mean, maybe not as much combat as I thought in my head. It does seem mostly puzzle based, but
just really wanting to punch some things as a penguin.
That's true. Beating up blocks and stuff. Yeah, can't beat that. Well, were there any other games that kind of? I think those are the big ones, but do you guys have any other things that really stuck out to you that you want to mention real quick?
I mean,
what about you, Dennis?
I not off the top of my head, at least none that I can remember. Not because none really stuck out, but I mean, like, the holidays were just so crazy in terms of not just, never mind the announcements, but the releases. So, now I'm getting everything just sort of confused of like, well, what came out? What hasn't come out yet? What got announced? And, what got shadow dropped? Like, it's just, it was a lot to keep up with, man. But I know there's, obviously a lot of ports like paparazzi, right, where you're just taking photos of all these little dogs and whatnot. That was on Game Pass for a little bit. Played that earlier in the year, and it was fine. It's definitely funny.
Is it like one of those games where like the main joke is like funny for like 10 minutes and you're like, okay, I get it.
Pretty much, yeah, because for a game that its main gameplay loop is taking photos of these dogs just sort of scattered and doing goofy things, all throughout these, environments that are split up into certain levels. The photo mode kind of is very bland, and that I think is what disappointed me the most. Is I was like, man, I'm actually trying. I understand this game is goofy, but like I am trying to take good photos here, and I'm trying to make, these dogs, shine, because they're all out and about, just strays. Of course. You know what I mean? I want these babies to get adopted. I want them to go to a loving home. So let me take some good photos, but I can't do that. This game is
hindering Dennis's artistic integrity.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So it was
not letting him express the natural beauty of these dogs.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a real problem. Care of that. Yeah, that one is coming out in early 2023, so we don't know exactly when, but soon-ish, presumably. Mm-hmm. Nicholas, any last-minute games you want to mention that from this spread-out indie world?
Probably the Gecko Gods. That was one that stood out to me just because, it's another one of those 3D adventure games which you don't always see when it comes to just indie titles, and it just looks really neat. First of all, you're a little gecko, so that's cute. But the kind of like platforming exploration aspect of it is really fun. Looks really fun with, combined with the fact that you aren't really limited by verticality because the gecko can just climb along the walls and the ceilings and whatever. And it just looks really charming. It has a really nice kind of visual style.
Yeah, it looks like a very dreamy. And yeah, I never would have thought that like playing as a gecko would be a great idea for a 3D platformer, but when you actually watch the footage and watching the way it moves, you really can see a lot of the possibilities. Even like some of the combat that they show off, where you're just kind of like ramming into things. I'm like, that looks pretty fun.
Yeah, it all looks really natural.
There's another animal.
I saw some folks kind of. There you go. Yeah, and I saw some folks kind of comparing the overall vibe and presentation a little bit to Zelda, which I was like, I can kind of see that a little bit.
I was getting more Journey vibes, honestly, from it.
Yeah.
But
yeah, no, that's a good one too.
But it does look absolutely. I think charming is definitely the best word for it. It's one of those games that I can absolutely get lost in. It reminds me a lot of that game Rhyme. If you guys remember Rhyme, it reminds me of that.
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah,
where,
that one was interesting.
Yeah. It's one of those games where I can just relax. I don't have to think about it. Just let me explore, and then eventually I just reach the end of the game by going at my own pace and really just appreciating that, that world building and that environmental storytelling.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you. One game I want to shout out really quick, mostly because I have no idea what the hell it is, and I want to know more. Okay. It's called Smile For Me. Do you guys remember this one? This one looks freaking weird. Okay, so it looks like a first-person adventure game, but the trailer has like a freaking like Muppet character, and I don't really know. It looks like it's kind of like a horror game also, but it's all just very surreal.
Oh, and, yeah, I've seen this game before. I've seen someone play this game briefly. It's a weird one. It definitely has some like subtle, well, maybe not subtle, but it leans into some like horror, psychological horror vibes. Despite it's one of those that like, we kind of cute and quirky that actually has like kind of a dark undertone to it. That kind of game.
Yeah. It definitely looks like one of those games you'd see people streaming as like just kind of like, oh, we're gonna try this weird horror game, see what happens, and it ends up. I mean, over on Steam, this game is apparently very popular, and I've never heard of it before, but this is its first time being ported to consoles, and I'm just like, I don't know what this is, but it looks weird and unique, and that's usually enough reason for me to be curious about something. All right, well, I think there were definitely a lot more games shown off than we'll have time to talk about, but. Overall, I think it was an interesting format instead of like a regular indie world. I think it made sense, for the holidays.
Yeah.
Just kind of dropping these games here and there, and it was nice to see some indies highlighted. I think a lot of people mostly think about big games during the holidays because it's Christmas and all that, but it's nice to see the indies getting a little bit of love at least.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
I think it's a good format. But I still prefer just sort of it all being sort of bundled in like a really nice package and being all presented at once. I think, especially with the hype around it, it's, you get people together to experience 10, 15 plus minutes of, these new trailers for these, exciting new announcements versus, if you release one trailer at a time, at these, randomized times throughout the day over a course of a, set amount of days, it sort of gets lost in, the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
Sure.
I agree.
Sure. Well, if you guys are looking for some hype, I think something we can all get at least a little hyped about is the new Fire Emblem game, Fire Emblem Engage, right around the corner. Gosh, I can't believe it's already almost the middle of January. Fire Emblem Engage is almost upon us, and while I don't think we have gotten anyone over on the site previewing it in advance of its January 20th release date, we did get quite a few previews and some gameplay that dropped over this kind of holiday break. And I just wanted to have a quick conversation over just some of the things that we now know about this game. Some of the changes, because clearly there are a lot of changes compared to the last mainline game, Three Houses. And in a lot of ways, it seems like, from what I've read, it's kind of regressing back more towards some of the older Fire Emblem games. Maybe not like super old, but talking Awakening and bringing back just some of the more linear progression from the 3DS Fire Emblems. So I think the main thing that stuck out to me from all these previews that I was like really impressed by for some reason is that apparently after battles now, you can you've beat the battle, your combat is done, you can just kind of like roam around the battlefields in 3D and talk with NPCs and explore and look for collectibles and stuff. I don't think we've ever seen that in a mainline Fire Emblem game before.
I don't believe so. But everything that they've shown off about this game, man, it's just like I mean, I was already sold like forever ago. So I mean, honestly, I just feel like all these trailers at this point, it's getting redundant because at this point they're just constantly. It's almost getting borderline annoying because it's just like, yes, I get it, just give it to me already. Like I just let me play
Sure.
it. But yeah, no, it all looks great. I love all the new ideas that are coming into this and the sort of blend of this legacy that this series has had for so long. And obviously, I mean, Awakening was the one that really caused Fire Emblem to blow up in the West. But to really go back and appreciate it all and have it all encompassed in Engage, I think is super exciting for those fans that have been around since the beginning, but also the fans that have that want to invest much more time into Fire Emblem, whether Awakening was their first, Echoes, or Three Houses. It's a great time to be a Fire Emblem.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And I think, and it's interesting to hear that you say that you were kind of already sold on the game, because I think for me, I'm actually very grateful for all this preview coverage, because I think where I was at a few weeks ago was I was like, it's great that there's a new Fire Emblem game coming. I like where they're going with the art direction. It seems like they have some new ideas, but I'm not really seeing why I should go pick up this game right now.
Yeah.
And I think now that we've seen a little bit more of it, I'm starting to appreciate, okay, like here's what they're trying to do.
Right.
And I think the main thing for me is, it seems like overall this is going to be a bit of a tighter, more linear experience. A lot of the previews were saying, since you're not really, exploring this massive hub world like you were in Three Houses, I guess not massive, but, fairly large and sprawling. And because you're not, like picking a different house or anything, it's very much more traditional along the lines of, you have your party, the story is pretty much, linear start to finish. And I think that makes the game a little less intimidating to me.
Mm-hmm.
We've just had so many massive RPGs right now. I really like the idea of sitting down with something that's a little more cut and dry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I definitely appreciate that more, traditional linearity of a game like this. Again, I mean, I've been holding up this sign for years. It's a big sign. I wrote it in a big bold marker. It says, "Not everything needs to be open world." So
Yeah.
so please stop. So I'm glad to see that this one is more focused and streamlined. Like it's hugely appreciated, believe me, because I can't tell you how much I got distracted. For better or for worse. I'm not saying it was a bad thing, but there was a lot of distractions and time spent, in that academy in Three Houses that I could have been spending, progressing the story like I wanted to begin with anyways, instead of getting caught up on like, let me make another dish. I hope they like this, eggplant parmesan just so we can increase the friendship. So it's ridiculous.
Well, you can still do that in this game, Dennis, if that makes you feel any better.
But like it literally felt like a full-time job. Like it was crazy. Like I just want to experience this incredible story, and so to
God, Ferdinand, why don't you like my fish and chips? So demanding.
Because the thing is, like, that game is so, engrossing, and I'm really trying hard not to use the word engage right now, and engaging. But I invested so much time into Three Houses, where it's just like, like even though I had an incredible time with it and so much fun in all these areas, it did feel segmented because I would spend time here, spend time there, and I never really got to the core and the meat and bones or the meat and potatoes of the story, right? Because again, it's like you get so sidetracked with all this other content. So I really don't mind that at all. Just give me an incredible story from start to finish, where there is no not as many distractions. Basically, that's the best way for me to put it.
Yeah. Nicholas, how are you feeling about Fire Emblem Engage now that we've gotten to see a little bit more of it? Was there anything that really kind of stuck out to you?
I think honestly I'm kind of in the same place that you are, Nick, where I think the game looks great. I think it has a great art style. I'm really happy for Fire Emblem fans, but there hasn't been a lot shown so far that sold me just personally on the game. You know, like I said, it looks great, but as much as I like Fire Emblem, I'm not a Fire Emblem super fan that has to pick up every single entry. I really enjoy the games, but not to like that extent necessarily. So I've been kind of waiting to see, you know, what is it about this game that's going to grip me into really wanting to pick it up. I haven't quite seen something like that yet, but I've been getting little glimpses here and there of little things that interest me. And I might pick this up at launch depending on what I see people saying about the game. If it really is like a fantastic Fire Emblem experience, then I probably will try and find time for it before Octopath Traveler comes out, like a month later.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Otherwise, yeah, we'll see. I like some of the things they're doing with the story. I kind of like the idea of having a, I don't know, I guess like a traditional sort of quest setup where it's like, we have to find all the magic rings in all of the 4 different kingdoms. It's a little basic and silly, but I like how kind of traditional that is.
Yeah, it's fine.
It's a very Fire Emblem premise. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think there's something to be said for that. From what I've heard and read, reading some of these previews, it sounds like, you know, despite the fact that they're bringing in all these older characters, it seems that the social sim elements are kind of being toned down a little bit compared to Three Houses. Obviously, we won't really know the full extent until we get our hands on it, but, you know, no one has really mentioned there being any romance options, which I know that was, you know, something that has been a little bit controversial for Fire Emblem fans. Some people say it's, you know, some of that can be a bit of a distraction from the actual strategy. You know, some people are kind of viewing this as like a not so good thing, saying support conversations don't seem as fleshed out, but other people seem to be saying, you know, it feels a little bit more like a traditional Fire Emblem game, and that the focus is more on when you're in this Somnial area, most of the things you're doing are to prepare yourself for the next battle. You know, there's not as much filler content. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like there's still quite a bit to do around the environments. Like in the Somnial, for example, someone was saying that there's an animal pen where if you've like adopted animals, they'll like give you resources over time, going to get milk from your cows and stuff like that. But it's all like in the pursuit of preparing for the next battle versus just for creating character relationships and things like that.
Can you imagine the irony if, you know, Fire Emblem Engage, the game with all the rings that people constantly wear, doesn't actually have any like marriage romance options in it?
Yeah, that would be pretty funny.
It would be pretty good.
And I suppose I could be wrong, but I really don't think they've mentioned it or shown it, or I haven't seen anyone talking about it. So.
I know that there are still support levels and whatnot that you increase. I think there's a similar new system for rings that, like, or I guess emblems is what they're called, where you can kind of interact with those and also have like its own sort of support level. But I think you're right in that we haven't seen explicit like romance options through the support system. I imagine that would be there because it's been in all the games since Awakening, I think. Maybe not in Trials of Valencia, I'm not entirely sure about that one, but it seems like an element they've been bringing forward consistently, so I don't know.
Yeah, but your point about like the new systems that they're introducing, when you're talking about like these different rings and stuff, so, and we talked about this a little bit in the past, but the idea is that, you know, as you complete battles and progress through the story, you get these different, what's the term?
Emblems?
They're like basically like shard. Well, not just the emblems, but you're making the emblem rings by like you pick up these pieces, and it's kind of like a gacha system to like create new emblem rings and summons and all that, or bond rings, excuse me. So you're collecting bond fragments to create these bond rings. And I'm wondering if instead of the whole system of, your party members are in relationships and having kids, and that's how you are passing on these traits, if they're really just going to be leaning solely on, you're creating these bond rings using these fragments and using that to determine skills and all that. I don't know. I guess we'll see, but that seems to be the direction as far as we've seen so far that they're going with it. Well, do you guys have any other closing thoughts on Fire Emblem Engage? I don't think we'll talk about this again until the game is actually out. I can't imagine there's much more they can show off at this point.
I mean, I wouldn't put it past them, honestly. But yeah, no, I mean, not really many closing thoughts other than, I think this will be a great game. However, I will say that as great as this looks, I don't know if it's gonna surpass Three Houses in terms of how much people enjoy it. Because I will say, just from everything that I've seen, even though I think it looks great, it definitely has its own feel, and is very clearly trying not to be Three Houses. But I think with how good Three Houses was and how much people experienced that as their first Fire Emblem, just because of the success of the Switch in general, I think a lot of people might be jumping into Engage, not necessarily confused, but definitely a little maybe disoriented is probably the best word to use.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it would have a hard time being better than Three Houses in terms of story, because I think Three Houses generally regarded as having one of the better stories in Fire Emblem games. Yep. I could certainly see some of the new gameplay elements making it have one of the tighter gameplay element, having one of the best gameplays of the various Fire Emblem games. Because
the overall loop and rhythm, you mean? Yeah. No, I think I'm with you. Well, we will find out in just a few weeks, so stay tuned. I'm sure we'll have more to say on it once the game is actually out. But in the meantime, let's shift over and talk about some of the other news that dropped over the past few weeks while we were out. Not too much all said and done. Lots of smaller announcements, but definitely some things we want to highlight for sure. Now, in terms of new game announcements, most of what we got came from that House of Indies presentation, but there were some miscellaneous things here and there. I think the big one was we're getting a new Sam & Max game. Specifically, we're getting a remaster of an old Sam & Max game. This game is called Sam & Max: The Devil's Playhouse Remastered. And I don't know how familiar you guys are with Sam & Max, but these were some of Telltale's original point-and-click games. And they had some 2D ones that they made, and then they made some 3D ones. And this is a remaster of one of the 3D ones. And I love Sam & Max. I love those characters. I love the kind of light-hearted approach to detective gameplay. And the games are not really super accessible on modern systems. And so the fact that this is the third game in the series that they've remade. So I'm pretty excited for this, actually. Are you guys big point-and-click fans? Are you guys familiar with Sam & Max at all?
Oh, I love point-and-click games, and I'm actually playing one right now. Well, I mean, I'll tell you what it is. I can't really talk about it because it's not out yet, but I'm playing.
Yeah.
The excavation of Hobbs Barrow. Well, at least it's not. I think it is actually out on PC actually. So yeah, actually, never mind. I could talk about it. But yeah, that's actually a point-and-click game. But the reason why I said I couldn't talk about it is because it's not out on Switch yet. It will be out on Switch in a couple. But I've been playing it on
soon.
Switch.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm really enjoying my time a lot with that game. That's a point-and-click game, and I've played all the Siberia games. Those are great. And yeah, no, I love point-and-click games. And I think that's an underappreciated genre. I feel, because I think a lot of people think of point-and-click and think of these old games from the 80s and 90s that no one really does anymore because technology has come so far. But you don't realize how many great adventures and stories that you're missing by neglecting that genre. There's a lot of great content there.
Right. Yeah, and not all these Sam & Max games have hit Nintendo platforms in the past. It's also interesting because even though these were originally made by Telltale isn't really involved in these remasters, so it seems like they're kind of licensing it out to this other studio called Skunk Ape Games. So it's cool to see. I'm glad that even though Telltale had all this turmoil, that these games are not just going to be lost to time. So I think that was kind of the big announcement that we got. Let's switch over to some release dates. We did get some release dates for some games. I just want to quickly go through. Now, this one is not one that I think everyone has heard of, but I think it's notable. So this game is called Akka Arrh. It's spelled Akkaarrh. And if you've never heard of this game, I don't blame you. But this is a new arcade project from Atari. It's a new arcade game. They've been investing a little bit in kind of remaking and remastering some of their older game concepts. But it's been a while since they put out something really new and original. And that's what this is. It kind of reminds me of TXK or Tempest. Are you guys familiar with those?
Familiar with Tempest.
Yeah. It kind of gives me Tempest vibes. And I love Tempest, so I'm actually very curious about this one. So this one is coming out in February, so not too long of a wait. February 22nd.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I think it's definitely different visually.
It is.
It's
if
it
you
really
go
looks
and
like
you
some
play,
kind of drug-induced fever dream, to be honest.
That's a good way to describe Tempest and TXK and this whole kind of sub-series of Atari games. Yeah. Yeah, these are great games, and I haven't played this one, but it looks right in line with those arcade classics. And apparently, this is kind of based. So it's from the same people who developed like Tempest and TXK, and it's kind of they're trying to make it kind of feel like it's some old Atari arcade prototype that was lost to time or whatever. I'm like, that's kind of cool. I can get on board for that.
And just the fact that it's like a new Atari game is, that alone I think is pretty interesting. See what they're trying to do nowadays.
Yeah, not something that happens every day. Do you guys remember when Atari was trying to make their own home console recently, the VCS?
Yep.
I have not heard anything about that.
Well, you know what's funny is like this is how much interest I didn't have in it. I actually got offered to be sent a review unit. I turned it down.
Oh wow.
Yeah. I was like,
Wow.
Yeah. I was like, no, I'm good, man. I have no interest. Like, I appreciate what Atari has done within the game industry. But they they're just part of history now, I think, and that is a thing of the past. I'm just gonna leave it at that. So,
back to the shadows from whence you came.
Damn, I would have checked it out, honestly. I don't know what the VCS really is, but
well, I think that was another reason why I turned it down. Also,
Yeah.
I was just like, I don't get it, and I don't think I care to understand. So,
yeah.
so yeah, I had to turn it.
Yeah. Well, can't review everything, right? Some other release dates we got. Dennis, I know you're excited for this one. GrimGrimoire, once more, the kind of remaster of GrimGrimoire, comes out April 4th.
Yeah, very much excited.
Not February.
Yeah, I'm very much excited for that. I'm just a sucker for like just NIS games in general, though. So like they're one of those publishers and developers where it's like if I see their name attached to something, I don't care what it is, I want it. Like that's how much sort of loyalty I have to them. So yeah, and this is no exception.
Yeah. Switch is going to be the place where you can play like most of Vanillaware's games, right? Because is Muramasa in there? No.
No.
I don't think so.
No, not yet.
Muramasa, yeah.
Okay. Damn. All right, I stand corrected.
I wish.
I think the reason why I love
Uh,
them so much is because they treated me very well when Vita was my main platform. When everyone was neglecting the Vita, NIS was still there, just being like, here's another one, here's another one, here's another one, so they were treating it very well.
Yeah, and speaking of NIS, they also announced another Trails game that they've been working on bringing over to the West for a while now. Trails into Reverie. That one is coming out on July 7th. I don't know exactly where that one falls in the whole Trails timeline. I'm not super familiar with that series, although I've been meaning to get into it. I have the very first one ready to go on my Steam Deck pretty much, but But yeah, not all the games are available on Switch, so I think that's kind of why I've been slow to get into them. But yeah, this is, if you are into this series, I'm sure you are very excited for this one.
Everything I've heard about, like, the Legend of Heroes games is generally, like, once you finish Xenoblade, you have a few different paths you can take. You either go, like, MMO with Final Fantasy XIV, you either go, like, past games with Xenogears and Xenosaga, or you go into Legend of Heroes. So,
Okay.
This has been a series I've been paying a little bit more attention to recently.
You're saying you're overdue, is what you're saying.
Potentially. There are a lot of these games, though, so I wouldn't really know where to start. But this
Well,
is
yeah, and
something
they,
I
and they
keep an eye on.
say you kind of, have to start from the beginning if you want to get the full impact.
What is
Like,
the
this
beginning,
is not like a
though?
Final Fantasy situation. Hell if I know, man. But yeah, so yeah, that one's coming out this summer in July, so that's exciting. All right, now in terms of actual news that we got, I mean, I guess that was news too, but here, newsy news, for lack of a better way to describe it. Y'all remember Chocobo GP?
No, move on.
I remember it. Nope. No, I don't think. Yeah, clearly no one else does. I think Square Enix is trying to forget it because
Square Enix was just like,
they
oh wait, this
basically-
is still running? Oops, turn that off.
Yeah. Oh, we didn't
like,
sell this along with
shoot,
our
we
Western
meant to
studios.
shut that
we missed-
down.
Whoops.
Yeah. Yeah, they're starting to wind it down. They have announced that they are ending support for it in terms of content updates, and that they've already discontinued the sale of the in-game currency, which is probably just a good thing in general. They should have just done that from the start, but yeah, they've been bringing, I mean, to their credit, they've been bringing new tracks, new characters with each of these seasons that they've had so far, but the game just never really landed, I think, with a lot of people, which is a shame.
It's a big shame. I know you reviewed it, Nick, but like, you know, as someone who I had a lot of interest in it, and I could never bring myself to buy the game. I did play quite a bit of like the free, like the light version that they had, which you know, I mean, you couldn't do much in it, but it was enough to sort of get my fix. And because I love kart racers, and there was a lot of potential there, but that game really, I mean, with how ridiculous those microtransactions were and just all the stuff that they had pumped into the game that you couldn't really unlock just by playing the game. You had to pay even more money. I was like, why wasn't this just a free-to-play game to begin with? It was destined for disaster the moment it came out. You're $50, right? So $10 less than what is arguably one of the greatest kart racers of all time, if not the greatest kart racer of all time, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. You know, and you're exclusive on that very same system as Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. You're destined for disaster. Like, there was no thought process. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh, and it was right around the time that they were releasing the Mario Kart 8 DLC, the first wave
I know,
of it.
the whole
So that was just another thing.
yeah, the whole
you
thing's
know.
a mess, man. Like, if it had been multi-platform, if it had been on Game Pass, or been like, you know, had like a crazy Steam thing going on, or if it was given away for free on Epic Games, whatever, you might have had a fan base there that would have probably still be playing. But honestly, like, yeah, no, I mean, that game was destined for disaster.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Yeah, and as a Switch exclusive too, nonetheless.
Yeah. Stupid idea.
Yeah, it seems like Square Enix certainly puts out a lot of Final Fantasy games, but they also are pretty quick to shut down the online/mobile focus ones when they don't land, because they also are shutting down their Final Fantasy VII Battle Royale that has only been out for like a year.
Yeah.
They're like, nope, this isn't making enough money.
Honestly, when I read about that, I completely forgot it came out. I was like, oh, right, that was a thing.
Yeah.
Square
Yeah, I've heard that
Enix-
one actually got better with time, but
Square Enix has not had a good track record recently with live service games, like, at all.
No.
I feel like they're riding on the success of Final Fantasy XIV, and they're like, yeah, we can do other things like this.
I think they can. I just,
But even
it's where the monetization gets tricky that things usually
right.
get brought down.
But we also have to remember that Final Fantasy XIV even came out as a disaster initially before
Yes.
Reborn, right? Or
This is
whatever that was
true.
called. So
This is true.
yeah, I mean, so you know, even
A
that
Realm
didn't,
Reborn.
you know, it come out exactly swinging at the gates, you know. So
Yeah, no, that's true. Well, Final Fantasy fans certainly have a lot to enjoy with the Pixel Remaster's coming out soon, Final Fantasy 16 on other platforms, so I don't think people are going to be moaning this one's lost for too long. But yeah, shame nonetheless. Now, we're going to get into rumor territory here for a little bit, so bear with me, folks. But and this one is not really confirmed by any means, but over the break, on December 30th, to be exact, we got a glimpse of something that appears to be the outer packaging for a Tears of the Kingdom Switch OLED, which has not been officially announced or anything like that, but the box art looks pretty convincing. It could still be a fake, so that's why we're flagging this one as a rumor. But yeah, I will say if this looks real, it looks very beautiful.
Yeah. Very much of two minds on this, because I've been holding out from getting an OLED specifically because I've been expecting something like this. So
wise man.
If this is a real thing, I'm happy and I will probably pick this up. But also, I just... if some of it is like a little weird, apparently this is the same way that a Splatoon 3 OLED was leaked, or it's a similar manner. And everything with the box seems about right. But the one thing that I saw someone bring up that does kind of bring me pause is that the symbol on the front, like the Triforce Eagle type symbol, it's the same one that was on a special edition Zelda 3DS, which strikes me as very, very odd. Like, I don't think that's something that Nintendo would have done to just reuse the exact same design, because it doesn't seem particularly fitting for this game either. I just posted it in the chat if you want to have a look at that.
Oh,
but it's
yeah.
That struck me as odd.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, again, it's who knows. I think it looks like a beautiful console, and the packaging certainly looks realistic enough that it could be. But I'd imagine like this is the kind of thing that if it is real, we'll probably find out in the next Nintendo Direct for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good mock-up though.
So, yeah.
It is fake. I mean, I think it looks.
It is very nice, yeah.
Yeah, they got the corrugated cardboard looking right and everything. Oh,
I hope this is real and I'll be able to pick this up, so long as we're not getting a new Switch within like a year of this existing.
Yeah, well, that leads us to our next rumor, which comes from a little bit more of a credible source. So there have been rumors about a Switch Pro, or just kind of a mid-generation upgrade of the Switch with more power for a long time. And we didn't really get it. We got the Switch OLED, which I think is actually a decent step up. Not anything game-changing, but not extra power or anything like that. But we never really saw that Switch Pro, for lack of a official name, come to fruition. But Digital Foundry, who generally know their stuff and they don't really put out flaky information, they said they spoke with some game developers and they believe that at one point Nintendo was toying around with a Switch hardware refresh, but that is no longer happening, as they are aware, and that the company is apparently focusing on making a true successor instead.
Yeah. Honestly, this doesn't surprise me. Like, I think it was back in 2020, I want to say? Maybe it was 2021, when they were all the Switch Pro rumors that, like, started flaring up massively before E3 happened. And a lot of it was from pretty credible sources. There was, like, Bloomberg reporting on something like that. And it just felt like there was too much smoke for it to just be, like, everyone trying to make something up for credibility's sake. Like, there was a lot of people that were reporting on things that made it seem like there was a more powerful system coming. And I think the idea of, COVID hit and there was a shortage of parts, so they couldn't go all the way with it, so they gave us they used the OLED screens, but didn't go much further than that. That makes sense to me. I would not be surprised if that is what actually happened, and just if this report is, if it's accurate, basically.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. It does make sense. We're so late in the Switch's life. I can't imagine that at this point they would put out a mid-generation refresh unless we have another, 6 years ahead of us for the Switch. But yeah, I think at this point that has to be the correct response. I don't know, Dennis, what do you think? Do you think it's too late for a mid-generation Switch upgrade?
I mean, honestly, with the success of the Switch, if new hardware is going to come out that it would be considered a true successor, a true next-gen console, you have to more or less have the same foundation that the Switch has. The problem is, we know Nintendo has a history of always changing things up every single hardware generation, right? So at the very least, we know we'd have backwards compatibility, and I think that is a safe bet just because of how successful it is, and you don't want a repeat of what's been happening, almost every other generation, right? Which the Nintendo Everything article makes a good point of, like, the Wii was incredible, the Wii U sold like crap, and then the Switch was incredible. And you don't want the next one to sell like crap, right? And it was the same thing where, you know, the DS, for example, was uh, one of the best-selling systems of all time, and then the 3DS just didn't even really come close. It was still a good-selling system, but only reached about, at the end of its life cycles, maybe half of what, the DS did. Um, which is still a lot, mind you. That's how much the DS sold, So, um,
Right, right.
but yeah, then GameCube didn't do good, but then the 64 before that did fantastic. So yeah, it was, you have this sort of on-off cycle with Nintendo hardware, and I think a big component to that, or a big reason for that happening, is because of, each new hardware refresh just feels so segregated from the hardware before, and we you know, had so many great ideas about it, right? Not only was it backwards compatible, but it had GameCube controller ports on the system as well. So, it was
Oh,
like,
I miss that so
right,
much.
exactly. Like, it wasn't like you could only do, like, Wavebird, or you had to do some specific, new generation GameCube controller that was only on the Wii. Like, no, you could just take what you already had from your GameCube and just basically, plug and play on your Wii. It was fantastic. You know,
You could plug in your DK bongos if you wanted
yeah,
and play some Donkey Kong Jungle Beat,
exactly.
which I may or may not have done.
Exactly. Exactly.
I mean, technically, there's a GameCube adapter for the Switch, right? Couldn't you theoretically use DK bongos through that on any Switch game?
I have not tried this. I don't know where my DK bongos are. I was
You
a
gotta
proud
get
owner
on
of them
that.
for many years. But I do, for science. This must be
Smash
tested.
Ultimate with DK bongos.
Oh my god. Imagine.
All right.
But
Add that to my New Year's resolutions.
but yeah, I think everyone has such a fondness now towards the Switch, and I think it's safe to say we all very much love our Switches here, and so to simply put that down, especially with what I feel has become absolutely brilliant, that at home or on the go, dock it on the TV or play it handheld seamlessly. I think that's great. I mean, that changed everything to the point where so many other people, once again, or other companies, once again, were trying to copy what Nintendo did, right? And
Mm-hmm.
the Steam Deck is the really the first one in a long time to really do that successfully. And but yeah, no, it's you got to be very careful with how you market your next console, even if you don't call it a Switch. Um, at the very least, two things need to happen: make it backwards compatible, and number two, please, for the love of God, have that eShop transferred over,
Oh, yeah.
because right now we've transferred,
yeah, no
yeah,
kidding.
because we've gotten too much into the digital era of gaming that you cannot ignore that this time around, especially with how hard Nintendo's been pushing digital content this year by offering, double gold coins, and even being, releasing
All these
themselves.
indie
Exactly,
presentations.
all of that, which
Yeah.
is digital
Mhm.
only. They themselves, releasing digital only stuff. Um, like all those, Kirby spin-offs and things like that you can't get physical copies of. Like, come on, you know what I mean? Like, stop with this. Like, every hardware generation feels like a point in time that is also lost in time, and there's no museum for this, right? So it's just like, once your hardware breaks 20 years down the line, 30 years down the line, you can't do anything about that anymore unless you, happen to pick one up, from a thrift store, or you pay someone on eBay $10,000, who happens to still have one, in good
Yeah.
condition. So
Yeah.
it's you cannot do that. You cannot. That digital
Yeah.
library needs to transfer over, whether you like it or not, and you better make sure that it is compatible with that hardware. I don't want to hear some nonsense like PlayStation tried to do it at first, where it's like, well, some PS4 games work, some other ones don't, and then even with PS4, some PS3 games, work, some don't, but it's only over the cloud, and it's just like, oh my god, man, like you're making this so complicated for no reason.
More complicated than it should be. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, let this be everyone's reminder too that we're just about 2.5 months out until the 3DS and Wii U eShops close permanently to new purchases.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, don't forget about that. If you've been sleeping on some digital exclusives and you want to play them before they're lost to the ether, now's your chance.
Yeah.
And it is kind of funny that as we're talking about all this, you guys remember how Mario Kart 7 got just like a random update not too long ago?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So this kind of leads into our next news story. So apparently, the reason why that game got a random update, and the reason why a bunch of older Switch games all got these random updates, even though they're not getting support otherwise right now, is because apparently there was this very like potentially dangerous hardware exploit. I'm totally gonna butcher what it's called. It's ENL buffer pwn as what it's called apparently. And apparently this was a pretty severe vulnerability that got reported to Nintendo by the folks who had discovered it, which is good. And but it would have allowed, basically, if you're having an online game session with someone who knows about this exploit, they could basically completely take over your device. It was like a super serious thing. And so that's why all these games have been getting random updates. Crazy.
Yep. It's good to know that they're still kind of taking care of that, just in case there are some people playing these games online. You're still going to be relatively safe as long as they retroactively update them. Although I think there's still a few games they haven't actually done this with yet, like the original Splatoon, but...
Right. They may not be able to update some of them anymore, but yeah, I'm sure people are still playing Mario Kart 7, so it's good to know, I suppose. One last bit of news before we start closing things out a little bit, and this one is a little bit bittersweet. So as we all know, the man, the myth, the legend, Masahiro Sakurai, he's been doing his YouTube stuff for a little while now. He's basically a YouTuber now. And he mentioned in a recent video, actually I should say, he mentioned in an interview that he is now semi-retired. Those are his official words. This whole YouTube channel that he's been doing has kind of been a reflection of his career in a lot of ways. And so, yeah, I wonder what this means. I wonder if we're going to see games with him still involved. I wonder how retired he is. I mean, certainly he's had a long career, so
yeah.
I don't blame him for choosing to wrap things up.
Yeah, I think he's probably still going to do a few more things. I think this is basically just him saying, like, hey, I don't want to do this until I die. So at some point I am going to stop.
Smash DLC forever. Yeah.
I can only add so many characters.
Yeah, this is... I think that was an actual quote from him at one point. He's like, I can't add all the characters. Please stop asking. Yeah. No, it would be sad if we didn't see another Kid Icarus game before he retired. But also, maybe he can come on as a consultant or something. I don't know. That's all I need. Yeah.
I mean,
all right. Well,
I am confident he's still going to probably do a few more things, right? Like, I don't think I don't think he's done quite yet. I think he's probably still got a couple of games in him. He might maybe just move to more of an advisory role rather than being, on the front lines in the trenches. But
yeah, right. He's still young. He's still got plenty of games in him. But I think he probably will end up taking that sort of like Miyamoto route, right? Where he's just, like you said, Nicholas, just that more like he's more of just being like a supervisor in a lot of these games, just making sure that things are going along steadily and sort of spreading his wisdom.
He's gonna open up his own damn theme park, and it's gonna be all his franchises.
Super Sakurai world.
Give me a Kirby theme park, seriously.
Oh, dude, I'll take
That'd be
that.
cool.
Dude, Dreamland, like a real Dreamland, imagine.
Oh man,
let's do a Kirby air ride. That would be fun. I'd be waiting around for that.
There's only one button to control the roller coaster.
You're just
the button to pay for the
drifting the whole
ticket.
time.
That's it.
Yep. Yep. There you go. All right. Let's talk about some of the games that came out during our podcast break. Most of the ones we mentioned that came out were part of that, again, that indie world spread out House of Indies thing. But there were some other games that came out that I do want to make sure get mentioned at the very least. So one of the games that just kind of came out of nowhere was Toy Soldiers HD, which is an older real-time strategy game that originally was I want to say it was a 360 like Xbox Live arcade game. And I know this remaster has been in the works for a while for Switch. It got delayed a few times, not entirely sure why, but it just kind of came out all of a sudden, and you can get it on the eShop now. So, do you guys have any love for this game at all? Or I wasn't like super. I'm like familiar with it, but that's about all I know.
Yeah, I don't really have any personal sort of attachment to it. I think when it comes to like, Toy Soldiers, I remember playing some of the Army Men games on Nintendo 64. And like
Oh yeah,
those were cool. I used to rent those all the time on Blockbuster, if anybody remembers Blockbuster. So, but for this particular game though, I never played it or invested. I was aware of its existence and I knew some people did play it, but don't really have any personal attachment.
Yeah, no, that's fair. It's not a major name. Now, here's something that we don't get all the time on the Switch, which is a simulation racing game, which is why I want to shout this one out. WRC Generations. Now, this is a rally racer game. The WRC franchise has been going on for a long time, and we've gotten a few of them on the Switch. They're not the most amazing ports in the world. I've seen them in action and they don't really look great compared to other platforms. But to be honest, on the Switch, you don't really have a ton of options, and I think they know that.
It's one of those take what you can get.
But I actually really like, rally racing games, so I'm really like kind of glad this game is here, but at least for me, I don't think I would play it on the Switch when I have other places I can play it on, you know?
I mean, honestly, like, and those games, like, usually get so cheap so quick that, I mean, you're better off just waiting for a sale elsewhere, probably, rather than playing a port, paying full MSRP for a port that is still going to be significantly hindered. So, yeah, I mean, honestly, if you want a game like that, personally, I would highly recommend Dirt 5. I think Dirt 5 is great.
Yeah, Dirt 5's a bit more arcadey versus something like Dirt Rally.
That is true.
But the WRC games are pretty realistic simulations. And this one I will say, like, it is coming in at a bit of a budget price, like $40. And in terms of content, this is the last WRC game by the current developers, and so they're kind of trying to compile a bunch of the stuff from older games. And so they've got like stages across like 22 different countries. There's like 37 cars. Like it's a pretty good package. So pretty much, yeah. So yeah, that's kind of cool. Now this next one is a little bit random, but there's a reason I'm mentioning it. So I don't know about you guys, but when I was a kid, some of the first like games I ever played as a young child were like Pajama Sam and Spy Fox and Freddy Fish, and I don't know if you guys played those ones, but for some reason they have been re-releasing these games on the Switch and on Steam for the past year or two, and they've bundled 6 of them together now. And so if you're like me and you just want a burst of nostalgia, you can play all these like childhood games on the Switch in one package now, which is just like, it's so random. But when I saw the announcement, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe they actually did this.
That's awesome though, because I do remember these games. I didn't invest as much time into these sorts of games, but I absolutely remember. And then the little bit of time I did spend playing, I remember just having a great time. So yeah, I mean you're absolutely right. Where nostalgia is definitely going to hit hard with this one, and it's awesome having it all in one place. Sort of similar to how I felt when the Disney any sort of Disney collection comes out, whether it's what was it, the 4 a.m. collection, something like that, and
4 a.m.
or something like that. I don't remember, but the early morning.
Oh, the
cartoons.
afternoon, the Disney afternoon.
There we go. That's the one. Why the
I love the 4 a.m. Disney cartoons.
They're all coming out of
Disney
the
After
club.
Dark.
Yeah, they're all,
Late night Disney.
yeah. Mickey's got his headphones in. He just got done DJing for the night. But no, even the one that had Aladdin and Lion King, like, that was awesome. Because those two games in particular, I played the hell out of, as a kid.
Yeah, there's definitely an audience for it. I don't think I would spend $60 on this collection, which is shockingly what they are asking for. But yeah, no. But on a deep sale, I don't know. Maybe if I was really wanting to throw back. Yeah.
Play at 4 a.m. and you're good to go.
There you go. Yeah. Okay, one more game I want to shout out that came out recently that has also been in the works for a little while is Lil Gator Game, which is a 3D platformer. It's kind of just adventure game. You play as this cute little gator and you're solving puzzles and talking to other critters and slingshotting enemies, and I mean, it looks adorable.
It's great. I've played through it.
Have you been playing
I've played through it all the way to the end. It's fantastic. I love it.
Not a super long game, too,
No.
from what I've heard, right?
No, it's I think I completed it probably in 8 hours ish. It's definitely not long.
Good.
The main thing about it in terms of comparisons, it reminds me a lot of A Short Hike. It takes a lot of kind of cues and elements from that, and I don't know if I've mentioned it on the podcast, but I really love A Short Hike. It was a super fun experience, and this is kind of just that, but you have a crocodile instead, and it's like more of a 3D platformer that takes a lot of Zelda elements.
An alligator.
Yes, sorry,
Come on,
my
Nicholas, it's
mistake.
a gator, not a crocodile. Totally
A
different.
reptile. But yeah, it takes a lot of cues from Zelda. Like the story itself is honestly really sweet and kind of nostalgic in a way, where it's you're a small gator with an older sister, and when you were young, you used to play like this kind of make believe Zelda type game where your older sister would create all these rules and like set up this world and like this nature park, nature reserve type thing, and you would all play together. And as you grow older, she's like super busy, but you're still trying to play with friends and try and bring back like that childlike wonder. And so you set up the park with all these like cardboard cutouts of monsters and all these fake quests of like getting super swords that are like sticks and fighting on shields that are like trash can lids and random things of wood. It's all super, super charming. I really, really loved it.
No, that's great to hear. Yeah, and this one was being published by Playtonic, the guys who made Yooka-Laylee. They're publishing games now. They also published Demon Turf earlier in the year, or last year, excuse me. So they've definitely got a knack for finding these very charming, kind of cutesy games, and they all seem to be hitting pretty good.
Yeah. I highly recommend this one. It's just really fun and charming.
Yeah, sounds like the perfect palate cleanser in what is going to be very soon a very busy season. All right, well, that just about wraps up our show. Thank you, as always, to all of our listeners. But before we close out for another week, let's all just quickly go through and talk about what we've been playing. Nicholas, let's start with you. I know we had, it's been a couple weeks now. I'm sure you had some time to get through either one big RPG or a bunch of smaller games.
I think I've mostly been focusing on getting some of my backlog done.
Okay.
So, more smaller games than big RPGs, even though I had planned to play more Monster Stories, I kind of just got distracted in that regard. So what I've been playing has mostly been, I played a lot of Picross, so that was fun. But the main things I was focusing on were finishing Snake Pass, which I started quite a while ago, and also really getting into Azure Striker Gunvolt for the first time, and just playing that all the way through.
Oh wow, so you're going way back. 'Cause Snake Pass came out
Yeah.
towards the launch of the Switch.
Yep,
right?
it was a very early eShop game that I picked up. It's a solid little game, but I'd only played about halfway through it before getting distracted by other releases. And
Sure.
Gunvolt is originally a 3DS game, so I
Right.
played like a few levels of it on 3DS, but never went much further with it. And I thought, you know what? I've been seeing. I think I saw some things about Azure Striker Gunvolt 3 getting like a big epilogue update, and it just made me think, man, I really should play that first game again, just to experience what it's like.
Oh, so you've played some of the other ones, but not the first one?
Oh, no, I just had played a little bit of the first one, and I'd seen some things from the other
Gotcha.
ones, but I'd never actually finished it. I'd only gone into like a few levels on 3DS, and so I picked up the game on Switch, and I beat the first game on Switch, and it was a nice little charming time. It's very much, I think, a Mega Man Zero type experience is what it kind of tries to emulate. And even if there's some kind of systems that I'm not super fond of, like the whole crafting mechanic or the whole challenges where you have to replay a level over and over to get like special item rewards for crafting, the core of the game is really solid. It's got a fun gameplay loop. The story is actually kind of, it's actually pretty tight. It's well crafted and I enjoy it, even if it is a little bit generic anime, but it's still fun. And I'm kind of looking forward to playing the other games now. I've picked up a few through the... there was a New Year's sale that went live a few days ago at the time of recording this, and I think
Yes.
it'll last for another week or two. And I picked up some of the games
It
through
ends
that.
this week, yeah.
Okay. But yeah, so I picked up some more of the Gunvolt games through that, and I'm looking forward to trying them out soon. So...
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I've heard good things about those games. I've never gotten around to them, but they keep making them, so they must
There's a
be
lot.
landed with people.
I mean, there's like
Yeah.
3 main lines, and I think 2 character spin-offs, and then like 2 8-bit platformers.
Yeah, like demake kind of experiences. Yeah.
Those games.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's cool. No, I'm glad you got to get through some of those smaller games. I'm with you. I need that sometimes. Dennis, what about you? What have you been playing?
Yeah, so I've been trying to be more focused with what I'm playing because I mean, obviously, with so much coming out recently, obviously you want to try and play it all. But I've been trying to force myself into sticking with 2, 3, 4 games max. But my main one anyways has been Final Fantasy VII, Inter remake Intergrade. I don't know. It's a Square Enix name. Okay, that game. Okay,
Yeah.
New
that one.
New
Yeah,
Final Fantasy
New
7.
Final Fantasy 7. Yeah, exactly.
Super Final
So-
Fantasy 7.
Which honestly, I'd much prefer that over the just a bunch of random words thrown in.
New Super Final Fantasy 7 U.
Yeah.
What is an intergrade, Dennis? Has the game explained it to you?
It. Do they ever? Do they ever? They just kind of expect you to just accept it, and then we move on. That's what it is.
It's like what is a live alive?
Right.
Man.
True, yeah. But yeah, no, I've been playing that, and I always it's nice that people for those that have waited, it was worth the wait, right? Because a year after the PlayStation exclusivity, that's when Intergrade came out, I believe, and then it got the whole next gen updates and stuff like that. And like, dude, let me tell you something. I've been playing that in 60 frames, and I know that was part of the big next gen update because I guess the game was originally in 30 frames. Because I'm playing on PC. I should probably clarify I'm playing on PC. But,
Okay.
and dude, like I can't even imagine playing that in 30 frames just because like not because that game couldn't be in 30 frames, but dude, like once I put the 60 frames on, because the game like defaults to 30 frames, but I went to the settings after like an hour and I was like, you know what, let me just play it in 60. Dude, it's life changing. It really is. Like it's so good how like smooth it is, but that game is really great. I think they did a really great job in sort of bringing such a an old classic and remaking it and making it palatable to not just how more contemporary game design works, but um, you know making it appeal to a larger audience, right? Rather than just like, all right, let's be super faithful and just keep it 100% turn-based, to appease to those nostalgic fans. They kind of found like a happy balance. It is still sort of you just press one button to attack crazy, but you can slow things down and choose your abilities, choose your spells, unlock items all with the click of another button too. And it's really nice, seamless, and smooth how everything works. I mean, they really knocked it out of the park, and like man, like you can see the big budget just coming through like every frame of that game. Like my God, like the cutscenes, and I mean it's a beautiful, just polished game, and I've been very, very happy with it. And and this is coming off of I just finished Final Fantasy IX, maybe 3 months ago, so
Right, right.
getting that nice sort of comfort food, and then jumping into something so substantially different with the remake that is it definitely shows you
Oh
you
yeah.
know where we were and how far we've come, but also how consistently great these games have been. Because regardless of the old school mentality that Final Fantasy IX had, and the tech at the time and the limitations, how that game, how the core functionalities were in that game compared to how they are in Final Fantasy VII Remake, they're both still fantastic games in their own right. So it's I think that's the beauty about certain games and film and books where it's just like, dude, if it's good, and if it's timeless, like it'll be great forever. You know what I mean? And it's
Yeah, the
Hmm.
bones are good,
right,
right?
exactly,
You can always make something interesting out of it.
exactly. So
Yeah, it's so funny that you were playing that game. I was gonna talk about some other games that I played over break. I'll probably save them for later because I've also been playing Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade.
yeah,
Totally out of coincidence. I think I was inspired to pick it up because I was played Crisis Core recently
yeah,
and I loved it, and I was like that was part of the reason why I wanted to review that game is because that was kind of my intro to the Final Fantasy VII world. I've never played the original, just kind of passed me by, and but I wanted to play the remake, and I finally felt like I had a good foundation to kind of jump in. And I will say I'm glad I played Crisis Core before because I do feel like the remake, based on what I know about like the original game and all that, the remake doesn't really it's very in depth, but it doesn't explain everything. And so having some of the background and the world building from Crisis Core, I think really helped me enjoy the experience a little bit more. And yeah, Dennis, I totally agree with you. I mean, in terms of the combat, it really nails the it, being a real time action game, but with a ton of strategy involved.
absolutely.
The fact that you can pause it at any time and issue commands, and you have to be bouncing between
Oh,
party
of course.
members and taking control. I mean, there's just no way really to be successful without it, unless you want to, take an hour to defeat,
Well, that's the thing too, right?
basic
Is like,
enemies.
yeah, I mean, your core focus really, especially if it's a bigger boss, like at the start of it, like, okay, I gotta stagger this thing as quick as possible because really no progress is gonna be made until that defense comes down, So, and you gotta
Yeah,
switch
yeah.
between party members, but even that's done so seamlessly, so well.
Yeah. I will say, I actually have been playing on the quality mode, which is locked to 30 frames on
Okay.
the PS5, and it really hasn't been bothering me. I think the trade off for the visuals for a game like this, for me at least, is totally worth it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't think the game is
Although,
playable by any means, but I mean, but something about the fluidity of 60
yeah, it's a matter of
frames. Yeah,
taste. Yeah.
Once you go 60, you never go
This
back.
is,
yeah, pretty much.
that's what people say, but it really depends on the game for me. I don't know, but what a privilege, right, to be able to choose your frame rate. On the Switch, you get if you get 30, you're lucky.
That's awesome.
You'll get 540p
Yes.
30 and you'll like it.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah. But yeah, I feel like, this game has actually, it's helped me deepen my appreciation for Final Fantasy a bit more. I'm not a huge like Final Fantasy fan. I've played quite a few of them, but I haven't played like all the originals or anything. And I still think I'd have a hard time going back to like even these pixel remasters. I don't know if I can do it nowadays. But when you've played multiple of them and you kind of see all these common themes being carried forward, and there's just something about a Final Fantasy game that it's got that feel to it. It's got that bit of romanticism in its themes, and it's manages to be serious but heartfelt at the same time. So they're really special games. I will say, in terms of Switch stuff, just one game I want to highlight real quick that I think this one came out of left field for me. It's called Dusk, and it's a first-person shooter that's it leans hard on the retro angle. Like, this game is designed to look like, the original Doom and Quake and all that. Not quite like all that old, but taking that kind of art style and stuff. And man, I was really surprised with this game. I thought I was going to bounce off it pretty quick, but I ended up playing through most of it. It gets really hard, as many of those older Doom-esque first-person shooters do. But it's a really good experience. It's super moody. The atmosphere is very well done. You're basically, the premise of this game is you've been like kidnapped by this cult and you're in the process of escaping, and you uncover this whole secret society of, I guess, cultists that are summoning these demonic creatures, and you're the big, not the Doom guy, but basically the equivalent, and you're just blasting away hundreds of enemies, and it's also just like terrifying at times because like shit jumps out at you when you are not ready for it. It's a really good game. If you like first-person shooters and you don't mind that kind of older art style, I'd recommend it. And on the Switch, it does have the gyro aiming as well. Ooh. So you love to see that from nice. Indies. All right. Well, I think that just about wraps it up for this week. Dennis, Nicholas, great to have you guys back after the holidays.
Yeah, great.
Happy to be back.
It feels amazing.
Yeah.
And Happy New Year to everyone.
Yeah, it's going to be a great... Yeah, and Happy New Year's to all of our listeners. It's going to be a great 2023. Lots of great games coming. So we hope you will stick with us. Be sure to spread the word to your friends if you like our show. We're going to, at least, as your host, I'm going to try and keep the show fresh as we go through the year. I'm going to try, keep things exciting, and certainly we'll have a lot of exciting games to talk about. So if you like the show, spread the word. You can find us on all the major streaming platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, wherever you get your podcasts. And we also have the video version on YouTube if you are already listening to us. Thank you so much, as always, for everyone's support. We'll be back at you next week with everything new and exciting in the world of Nintendo. See you guys later.